Hello, everyone. Welcome to our self-publishing business workshop with Kate Baray. Kate Baray is an author who's published over 50 books under several pen names, and she's a good friend of mine and a big inspiration for the Seasteading Novelist program. So you can thank her for me hosting that event to begin with and bringing all of these seasteading novelists together. And anyone else who's joined this call who is a writer of any kind, you're more than welcome. And I hope you will explore seasteading as a topic for maybe one of your future books. But Kate is going to talk to us about fiction writing and making a living as a fiction writer. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you. I had no idea that I was inspirational. That's awesome. I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation. That I've got a little PowerPoint presentation. There's not tons of, oh, I can't talk and click at the same time, apparently. There's not tons of information on it because my understanding was y'all are a chatty bunch and happy to ask questions. So I am happy to answer them. If you have questions during the presentation, just use the chat. If you have questions after, again, I didn't have slides because I was anticipating questions at the end. So for sure, ask your questions at the end as well, if you can hold on to them. All right, hold on here. I want this to be a presentation. There it is. Okay. Awesome. Okay, a checklist presented by Kate Baray, and I made sure to put that word in there, checklist, because I wanted you guys to know these are topics that by themselves are presentations. So my hope is that you will walk away with a to-do list and a few resources, and you can go on from there and get all of the knowledge and meet all of the people and learn all of the things, because you're not going to do that today, unfortunately. So this is a starting point for you, I hope. So the business of fiction self-publishing, excuse me, because I am a self-published author. I do write fiction. As I mentioned earlier before we were recording, this is geared towards fiction. There's some things that will overlap with what nonfiction folks do, but there are some pretty significant differences. So if you have questions about that, for sure, ask at the end. All right. And I have a very clicky keyboard because I have a one of those manual typing keyboard things. So sorry for the clicks. All right, who am I and why do you care what I have to say? I very specifically wrote this in the third person because one of the things on your checklist is to write an author bio, and they're always written in the third person. So awkward to write, but they are always written in the third person. Why do you care what I have to say? I am a full-time fiction author, which means anytime I'm recorded, I never talk about money. Sorry. So that's just one of my personal, indie people are typically quite open about money, but I don't like for that conversation to happen while I'm recorded. Anyways, so if you have questions about that afterwards, when the recording stops, I'm happy to answer it. What that means is I have no other job. That is my only job. It pays for all of my bills. I am not flush. I am comfortable. All my bills get paid. So and I reinvest in my business significantly each year to grow my business. I have published over 50 books. I do have 3 pen names. And if you are one of those people who's like, well, how are you qualified? What is your education? I do have an MA, which is very heavy in literature. I do have an MBA, which is obviously a business degree, and I do have a law degree as well, although I'm not a practicing attorney. Nothing I will be saying is legal advice of any kind. All right, what will you leave with? 3 to-do lists to get you started. One is going to be establishing a presence online as an author. Another is going to be a pre-flight checklist for marketing. And this is really important. I call it pre-marketing or a pre-flight checklist for marketing because it's not your marketing to-do list. It's what you do before you start marketing. And then a few tips for launch, and that's going to have just a little bit about marketing. All right, establish your online presence. So why you should establish your online presence as an author? Because, let's see. Hold on a second here. Can't see my notes the way I have this set up. Sorry, guys, it's been a while since I've done a presentation. Been locked in my house, avoiding people, writing books. So it's important to have an online presence as an author because that's how most books get sold when you're an indie and you're self-publishing. You can do things like in-person book signings, attend cons. That is, for most people, a pretty small percentage of what moves your books. Remember when I said fiction and nonfiction are very different? That's quite different for nonfiction folks, that it can be. I understand that nonfiction is frequently tied to speaking circuits. So those are very different things. But for fiction folks, most of what you're going to be doing as far as sales would be online. You also want to show up. If somebody somehow hears about you and they go to look for you, you want to be visible in the virtual world, right? You want to be on the internet somewhere. So here's your first checklist, or your first list anyways. Where are platforms or places? That's what a platform is, basically some place online where you can exist. Some of these are more difficult than others. So I've got a little star next to your own website. The reason I star that is I think it's one of the most important as a full-time author. I think it's also one of the ones with the biggest hurdles I guess, accomplishing it, right? Because you have to have, oh gosh, I can't even remember. It's been so long since I did my website. You have to pay for your domain. You have to either know how to design a website or know how to use a third-party service like Square or Wix or something like that. Or you have to hire it done. I did my own initially. I now hire it done. I have 2 different websites. 2 of my pen names are on one website, and I have another website, and it's all a big bunch of stuff to maintain and keep up. And it's very important because I have a lot of books and it's my livelihood. I would say if you have a book, that you can wait on that. Don't stress out about it. It is important. I always say to people who want to do this full time and long term, it's important to own where you live. You don't want to rent. Renting is Facebook. Renting is Goodreads. Renting is BookBub, right? Those are places you don't own. You're just renting the space there. But for you guys, if this is your first book, I would say file that one away. Know that it can be important as you have more books. Definitely low-hanging fruit, very easy to do. You should have a BookBub profile. And I've given you a website there, partners.bookbub.com. Why? Because voracious readers live on BookBub, right? You should have a Goodreads profile. Why? Once again, because voracious readers live on Goodreads. And by live, I mean they interact there, they go there for recommendations, they go there to find discounts, they go there to talk about books. So these are 2 really huge, not retailer, not where you're selling the book directly, but places where readers live and like to talk about books. And it's relatively easy to have a profile on those places. So you definitely want to be there for sure. You want to be on BookBub, you want to be on Goodreads. Another place that you're going to have a presence is each of the retailers that you choose to publish at. My understanding is there was a previous publishing, I guess, presentation on the logistics of publishing. So that would be formatting. It would be uploading to the retailer. You guys have already talked about that. And if you weren't there for that presentation, again, Carly Rose said that those are available. She can mention it again at the end where you would find those. So you've already, by the time you've come to this point, you've already kind of decided you want to be on Amazon. You want to be on Amazon in all the places. If you're nonfiction, you probably want to be on your own website, right? So once you've decided where you want to be, it's really important to have a well fleshed out presence on those retailers as well. So if you were to go to any retailer where my books are sold, you should be able to find an author bio on me. So, all right. And then any place you love to be that allows you to post your profile. And then the important part, and I bolded and underlined love, meaning don't go out and find a bunch of places to go interact. Don't go out and find a bunch of places to post about your books, to post about your author bio. Don't hunt those up. Hit the major ones, because again, there are lots and lots and lots of readers on BookBub and Goodreads and the retailer sites. But if there's some place that if you spend all your time on YouTube and all you do is watch cat videos on YouTube, then for sure you can create a YouTube channel and you can post little trailers on YouTube or you can exist on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, in case you're wondering. So if there are places you really, really enjoy being, then have a presence there, but don't go out of your way to be on those other places. Your author bio. What is the function of an author bio? First, you want to tell readers what you write. You want to offer credentials if you have them. And a credential would be New York Times bestselling author, USA Today bestselling author, For nonfiction, it would probably be like what I at the beginning of the presentation. Oh, I have an MBA and I have a whatever qualifies you in the land of your nonfiction subject matter, right? And those would be your credentials. Give them an idea of your voice, meaning don't write it in some voice that is not your own. That's why it doesn't usually work to have someone else write your author bio. You want to tell them something about who you are and where you come from. And it's always, if you're a fiction writer, it's always great to go on to places like Amazon, Goodreads, wherever, and especially for self-publishing, to go look at other self-published authors who are successful and to read their bios. See. Oh, and then you always want to give them some way to connect with you in a place that they're comfortable, which is why you give them frequently more than one option. If you're only going to give them one option, it's usually going to be your website, which is going to have all of the other options. But wherever you're at, include those, because maybe they hate Facebook, but they love Instagram or whatever, right? Because people don't like to change the platforms that they're comfortable with. They're not going to necessarily go investigate you in a platform where they're not familiar. All right. And I've got a little, see if I can figure out how to move this thing down here. Here we go. Okay. For help in writing one of these, this is a link, and there's a little resources page at the end that I put all the links that I'm giving you together. Kindlepreneur is, I believe it's Jave Chesson. There's a few like kind of, I don't know what the experts who have been around in the indie landscape for a very long time, right? There's a handful of them, and he's one of them. So he usually has pretty good information on his website, and I kind of scanned his author bio, his little blog thing on it, and it looks good to me. So I Googled it, and there were so many of them. You just want to make sure that you're leaning towards an author bio, like how-to, that is geared towards indies, because they tend to be just a little bit different. Okay. Since I can't see all your shining faces, I'm just going to stop for a second. When I do that, I can't see anything. Did you guys have any questions on that first part? Did anybody want to ask anything?
All really good. It's all. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I was going to say, what made you switch from doing your own website to something a little more polished and professional? Was it you didn't feel like you were representing where you were at a certain point, or?
It's just so time consuming. You have to deal with the updates, and you have to deal with the so because I have such a large catalog and I want everything to be interconnected, and you can check out my website if you want. One of them is catelawley.com. Here, I'll just put it in the chat. It's not super fancy, because what's fancy about it, you can't even see. The fancy part is the back end. So I was doing a WordPress, I think it was Divi or something like that was my, for you guys who are in WordPress, you probably know that. That's the theme I was using. And it was fine, and it didn't look terrible. It looks better now, but more importantly, now I can go in the back end and I can put in all of the information, and it's like, this creates an excerpt, and this creates a series page, and this creates a printable book list, and it's just much more sophisticated. So I would say, again, I think your catalog size is really going to inform that decision, and your budget. So if you have an extremely large catalog, but you're still not yet making money with it, you might want to wait. Just depends on how much time you're spending doing that. But if you have the money to spend, obviously paying someone is going to give you a much prettier end product. And for me, it was a time thing. I wanted that super slick back end, because I go and put, every time I have a release, which is maybe every 2 months, going in and having to update stuff on my website, right? And I don't want to spend a bunch of time on that, because I want to write more books.
And you write under both of these names?
I write under Cate Lawley, Kate Baray, and Gemma Cates. And Gemma Cates is my super, super steamy paranormal romance pen name, so beware.
Yeah, I heard another question.
Yeah, was there another question before I pop over to the PowerPoint again? Okay, so pre-marketing. So for pre-marketing, this is your before launch. These are the things you really need to be looking at. And each one of these is kind of its own very large discussion, once again, okay? So
do you want to be sharing your screen right now?
Oh yeah, am I not? Booger, hold on. Thank you, Carly Rose.
You're welcome.
There it is. Okay, thanks. So each one of these for your packaging is going to be like, again, its own presentation almost. But all of these things make up your package. So your title, your subtitle, your series title, if you have one, if it's not a standalone book, your cover, very important, your blurb. And when I say blurb, I don't mean what's on the inside of a book jacket. Your blurb is, it's not a synopsis. It's not what the book is about. It is the ad copy that you write to sell your book, right? It's the thing that shows up on the retailer page when you go to a book on Amazon or wherever. Pricing is actually considered part of your packaging. So are reviews, although those can be less in your control. And your sample, which is, again, with digital books, this is super important because they can just simply click one little button and then read the first 10% of your book. So if you're new to them, which you will be because you're all new authors, right? Then it's really important that that sample be polished and grabbed right from the beginning, because if they can't get through the first 10%, they're not going to buy your book. All right. And these are the questions that you ask yourself. Are all of those things, both individually and together, an accurate reflection of your book's genre and subgenre? And if you don't know what your genre or subgenre is, figure that out. That's super important. Are they setting an appropriate reader expectation? And are they polished and professional? And I'm going to click to the next page because I have an example. And I'm not telling you, hey, this is like the awesomest product page ever. I just grabbed one of my books that has a lot of sales on it, and this is one of them. So, and it's a free book. It's a free book because I have 9 in the series, right? This is a marketing tactic that works for people that have lots of books. So you look at the cover, and the hope is when you look at that cover, you're like, oh yeah, that's probably a little bit funny, especially given the title. And oh, there's probably some like magic or maybe some vampires in that. It's probably just a little bit silly, right? And then you're like, okay, pricing, I can get this for free and try it. That's really fun. For nonfiction, your pricing is going to be completely different than fiction. It's usually much, much higher, unless you're geared towards the author crowd. And sometimes then it can be a little bit less, but anyways, nonfiction is typically going to have a much higher price tag. That's a whole nother topic. But usually fiction books are going to be under $9.99. Right. And most indie published are probably going to be under $6.99, like $6.99 and less. Just kind of depends on what your genre is and what you're doing. So make sure that you're doing some research to see what other people are doing and what's appropriate, what readers are going to expect when they get there. One of the things that we didn't really talk about, or I didn't really mention, it does give it a more professional appearance when you've got the Kindle, the audio, the paperback. I happen to have an audio CD because this is a traditionally published audio. That's not normal for an indie. So Kindle, audio, and paperback. So if you have all of the formats, that also gives it a more professional look. Doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to buy it because it has all those things, but it gives it a more fleshed out look. Let's see, series, yeah, okay, series, Vegan Mysteries. Okay, if there was any doubt from the cover, which there could have been, it is a mystery, right? So all of those things, let's see if I can go back. All of those things, title, subtitle, series title, cover, blurb. Oh, and I didn't read the blurb out loud, but if you were reading it while I was talking, it's a little silly, right? In keeping with the slightly humorous tone of the book. And again, it doesn't say what the book is about. It sells you on the book, right? Pricing, reviews, sample. Now, I didn't show you any of the reviews. That's a little more complicated when it's your first book, but we can talk about that at the end if y'all want. All right. Okay. So you've gone through and you figured all of that out. You figured out what your genre is. You figured out what your subgenre is. You figured out the way to convey all of those, the reader expectations for your book. Is it a little humorous? Is it very dry? Is it epic? Is it, whatever? All of the things that your book, you found a way to convey that through that one page. And you found the best way to do that, I can tell you, by looking to see how other people are doing it, right? So go and look and see what other people are doing. Make sure that they're indies. Sometimes TradPub, traditionally published books, don't always do the best job of some of the selling aspects like the indies do. successful indies. You want to look at successful indies, people who are selling books. And sometimes they do an absolutely remarkable job, and it is not something you can mimic. So TradPub is just in general kind of a bad place to look for most genres. That's not true. There are some exceptions to that. Women's fiction is pretty big for indies right now. And when women's fiction first started being published by indies, they absolutely mimicked the TradPub women's fiction. Now that it has kind of its own look, but again, how are you figuring that out? You're going to Amazon, you're looking at product pages, which is what I was just showing you, right? You're looking at the product pages, you're saying, does it look like it has a lot of reviews? Does it look like it sold a lot of copies? Is this person, does it polished? Does it look presentable? Can I take notes from how they've done this? Does this apply to my book, right? Okay, so you've done that. So now what you're going to do, you're going to act as if your book is going to sell copies even before you publish, right? So you've got this book, you're looking at it on your computer and you're like, I need to publish it, but I'm going to pretend like it's already published and I'm already selling copies, right? And how are you going to do that, right? And why are you going to do that? Well, the reason you want to do that is the very first person that reads that book, literally the first person, could absolutely love it. And if you don't have it set up right for that person who's read it and loved it, to be able to get in touch with you, to be able to write a review for you, to be able to sign up for your newsletter, they're going to toddle on off to the next book and forget all about you. So you need to have all of that done before you ever publish your book. So that's what I'm talking about when I say craft your back matter. That's the stuff at the end of the book. So you want to sell the next book, you want to get newsletter signups, or you want to encourage reviews. You have to decide what is the most important to you. You can put all three of those things. And every once in a great while I do. I usually pick one or two. That's up to you. But make sure whatever you want the most is the thing you ask first, right? For me, it's buy the next book. If you don't have another book, then you don't want them to buy the next book. You want them to sign up for your newsletter. Or if you're like, man, a newsletter is a big deal, I should really set that up. I'm going to get to that next month. Then I would say, one, think about that again. Newsletters are really important. But if you do say, I'm going to set that up later, that's fine. Then encourage them to write a review for you.
So if you set up a major domo doing a newsletter, what are you actually telling when your next book publishes, when you're going to do signings or readings, or what's in there?
In your newsletter?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking me? What's in the newsletter that you're signing up?
Yeah. What do they get for signing up? What's the expectation?
What for signing up is completely different from what you're going to deliver when you have an active newsletter, right? Two separate things. So one, if you've got an ask at the back of the book saying, please sign up for my newsletter, you're usually going to say, when you sign up, you will get X, right? For me, that's going to be, trying to think what I just wrote. Okay, so I have this little series with these little fairies, and I read a lot of magic stuff, right? So I have these little fairies, they're running around, getting into mischief and doing bad things. And but kind of secretly helping my main character. And there are all these other little magical creatures, right? So there's this little magical creature world, right? And so I wrote the first book in that series, and then my sign up for my newsletter, and you will get, and it was a pitch for a little short story that kind of tied book 1 and book 2 together. Right. So it was this little tiny short, when I say short story, I mean, it was like 2,000 words, right? Since you guys just finished writing a whole bunch of words, you know, that's not a lot. So really tiny. And then I put out the second book. And then for the second book, I was like, hey, you want to know more about that little thing that I mentioned, that little fun creature that I mentioned? Go sign up for my newsletter and you'll get this fun little story, right? So I tie it back to the story. If you're writing romance, it's the easiest. Romance people love, 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 love to hear more about the couples that you've written about. So if you've written couples, then you're like, oh, you know, see them at Christmas time, or, you know, see this couple doing this really fun thing. They went to the circus. I don't know, whatever. If you're writing historical fiction, then sign up for my newsletter and find out about this really cool piece of research and how I applied it to this particular part of the book. Right.
So it's like, so you've built the characters, you've built the sort of the universe, and you give them little tastes of more to come while you're preparing to publish your next book, basically.
Yes.
Keep their appetites whetted, and then prepare them for what's coming,
That's to get them onto the newsletter. Once you've gotten them on the newsletter, that's a completely different thing. You can continue to do that if you have the time and energy. That can be time consuming. What you're more likely to do is to say, okay, thank you for joining my newsletter. Here's this thing that I promised you. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to publish a book every 6 months, or a book every year, or a book every, how often that's going to happen. I don't know for you. And then you have to decide based on that, how often you're going to send your newsletter. I try and send my newsletter a few times a month, but I'm also publishing at least every 2 months. If you're publishing once a year, maybe you want to send it quarterly. Ideally, you're sending it at least once a month. That's what data shows. And then what you would do is you would say, hey, I'm working on my next book. And I did this really cool piece of research that I wanted to share with y'all. I'm not sure if it's going to be in the book yet, but I just thought it was so exciting. Hey, I went to the store today and you won't believe what I saw. That thing that I wrote about in the book, I saw that in that, whatever. I mean, you know, whatever, however you can make it interesting and tie it back to your writing. This is my workspace. This is where I've been writing today. I do stuff like that on social media usually, but some people do it on their newsletters. Does that help? Yes, no, maybe, hopefully. For me, someone who's releasing every 2 months, I'm sending out, here's the cover, here's the pre-order link, here's what the story's about. Oh, hey, here's the first chapter. Here's a sale on the book that precedes it. So I'm doing things that are more directly tied to generating sales and pre-orders, but you don't have to do that if you don't have that many books. Okay.
Oh, we have a question about newsletter versus blog. Are there people who use a blog instead of a newsletter?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the whole blogging thing, and I feel like it's like for authors like 10 years ago, but I am wrong. That is wrong. That is not right. I have a good friend, and you can go check him out. His name is M.G. Heron. Go look at his website, and you can see he's a content strategy manager, and he is quite clever, and he has a very clever blog, and he does very clever things with it. So if you're into blogging, go check him out. M.G. Heron, Herron. And I think Carly Rose may know him. He's from Austin. All right. But yeah, I would not, the only reason that I use my blog is to like put excerpts if I don't want to put the whole thing in the newsletter, or I'm terrible. Don't look at my blog on my website. It's terrible. Okay. Craft backmatter. We talked about that. Typically, if I'm encouraging reviews, it's in a note to the, it's like the author's note at the back. It's not like right after I finish the book and what I would consider the backmatter. All of the stuff after the end is the backmatter. But what I'm talking about is as soon as you finish reading, right there's something that the author asks you to do. Okay, so you're going to set up a mailing list to capture reader emails for future newsletters. And then I give you a resource for this. This is Tammy L. Lebrecht's Newsletter Ninja. It's a book. And there's a book 2 now. And I'm giving you guys some resources that I haven't actually used myself. And that sounds really terrible and counterintuitive. And let me tell you why. I have spent a fortune on courses and conferences. And so I'm getting some of this information in other ways. But these are really solid resources that I have seen recommended over and over again. And I've like scanned through them. So this is great. Nobody has anything but good things to say about Tammy's Newsletter Ninja. So that's a great starting place. All right, we already had a little break to ask questions. So launch tips. This is probably the thinnest part of the presentation because this is hard. Set your budget, don't overspend it, have realistic expectations. If you have one book, there is occasionally someone out there who has a book and it just does amazingly well and sells all sorts of copies. And in the land of fiction, that's really unusual. They've usually had a different pen name, and this is the first book in their new pen name, or they've had 5 other kind of duds that you just really kind of don't hear about. And then suddenly they have this series that's blown up and they're like, oh, overnight, 5 years in the making, you know? So it's a little unusual to kind of knock it out of the park with your first book. That said, it has been done and can be done. It just depends on you, your book, your resources, lots of things. But I would say typically, your best bet is to write your next book. And I hate when people tell me that. I'm like, I have 50 books. That is idiotic. But when you don't have 50 books, it really and truly is. And the reason for that is that your marketing dollars are going to be amplified by multiple books. So think about it this way. You can spend $1 or however many dollars it takes to get a purchase of one of your books. And when they're done, they're done. That's the book that they've bought and read. Now, that free book, I advertise that. It's free and I advertise it. And the reason I do that is because I know once they read the first book and the second book, they are likely to buy all the books. Now, they're not likely to buy all the books after reading the first book. You have to get a reader who's read the second one. Once they've read the second one, so my biggest drop off is book 1 to 2. But once they bought the second one, they're basically buying the whole series. So that means that I can spend that same amount of money that you spent to get that purchase of that book 1 to get a purchase of 8 books, right? So it's just so much easier to be able to advertise profitably, not in the red, when you have more books for them to buy. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in a series. There are some ways to kind of manipulate your back matter to really encourage people to read other things. One of the things I hope that you guys will do after you walk away from this presentation, you're gonna be like, wow, there's a lot of stuff, I don't know, whatever. The next time you read a fiction book written by an indie and you get to the end, I really hope that you pay attention to all the stuff that they've done, because I mean, that is one of the best things now about reading fiction for me is I get to the end, it's something I loved. And then I'm like, look at this clever way she pitched this other series. Look at how she tied this to the newsletter bonus. Look at how so you can, if you're aware that it's happening, I think you can learn a lot of stuff by you can learn a lot of really great tips from how other people are setting up their back matter. Okay, so write the next book. Here's a hard one for me because I'm a huge introvert. You need to make author friends in your genre, connect with authors in your local community, and also relevant digital communities. So this is hard. We can talk about this. I'm not going to give you any tips right now, but we can talk about this like, chit chat. And then the last thing I have on here is consider a low spend, auto-targeted. That is a term of art. Auto-targeted is a term of art for this marketing platform. Auto-targeted Amazon Marketing Services ads. I don't really think you should do this. I think if you're desperate to spend money, this is one of the ways you can spend money without killing your budget in 2 seconds. So they're cost per click, meaning you're paying every single time somebody clicks on it. And those are always a much more advanced form of advertising, but I was kind of struggling for things to tell you to do. So this is one of the things that you can do. And I think that if you have a resource to learn how to do it, that it can be helpful. Let me get this out of here. Okay. I love David Gaughran. Dude is really cool. He offers a course, it's free. And I am not really familiar with anyone else who does that. It's not take this little mini course for free, and at the end, I'm going to sell you on this bigger course. It's not like that. He gives you an entire course by email that is walking you through publishing. So it's super handy. I would definitely recommend it. I think it's really cool. And it's good to be on his newsletter because he's just a really smart guy. So he's great. And then these are the resources that I mentioned. The author bio from Kindlepreneur, the newsletter setup from Tammy Lebrec's Newsletter Ninja. And again, like I mentioned before, I don't know of anything else like what David does. It's really unique. Most things, and I'm not criticizing people in doing this. Most of the time when people come and give presentations like this, it's because they're selling something, which is fine. That's great. You get lots of really great information that way. But like, I don't have a course to sell you, right? He's the same way. He's like, except he's put way more effort into his stuff than I into this evening. Sorry. But he has this massive course and it's many emails long and it's really useful. All right. Okay, questions. Nonfiction people, did you have any questions about the difference between fiction and nonfiction? I think the formatting is massively different usually. There's just going to be a huge difference in the formatting, which is going to have a difference in the cost when you're getting it printed, and then when you're also getting delivery fees for electronic books, unless you're doing kind of a pamphlet-y, low graphics. You don't have a lot of graphics involved or a lot of pictures involved, but a lot of nonfiction is going to be really expensive that way. It's going to be more expensive. It's going to have a higher retail price usually. Not necessarily going to be in series like fiction is. There's a lot of different things.
Walter asks, who does your cover and audiobooks?
I have, I honestly don't know how many cover artists I have. I have at least 5 or 6 different cover artists that I work with, because I have a lot of different series and not everyone can do everything. And not everyone does the right look. And then my audiobooks, I have a handful that are published traditionally, and that is probably, it was a fine choice at the time, but I don't choose to do that anymore. I do them all myself now. And by doing them myself, what I mean is I hire a narrator and I own all the files and I upload the files to ACX is the Amazon one, right? ACX.com. And I actually use, I'm what they call wide, meaning I am on all the places I can be with audio. So I actually upload mine to Find a Way Voices, which is a third-party distributor. So they distribute to Google Play for me, and they distribute to Apple, and they distribute to Kobo, and all these, they distribute to libraries, right? Which professional organizations do I, I'm a member of RWA. It's been controversial in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe. They just have so many good resources and they have good advocacy. So I am a member of RWA, Romance Writers of America. And I'm also a member of Novelists, Inc. You do have to qualify to join Novelists, Inc. It's intended for more advanced professional authors. So you have to have a few books that earn a certain amount of money, but it's not a terribly high bar. So if you are actively looking to make money off of your books, then I would go look at the requirements and see when you hit it, because you probably will eventually. I was a member of SWIFA, Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America, but I didn't really get anything out of it, and I don't want to say anything bad about them because I think they're lovely. It wasn't the organization for me. I'm a member of the Authors Guild because, again, they do advocacy that I'm happy with. They and Ally, ALLI, are they get together and they kind of they speak for indies, they speak for authors in general, so that's important to me.
I want to go back to Sandy asked a couple questions. First one, where do you network?
Yeah. Okay. It's terribly difficult for introverts, which probably a lot of us are, since we're all typing away on our computers. So I would say start local. Local people are my emotional support as a writer. I have a few business friends that are local, but most of them are really, they're going to meet with me when I have a deadline. They're going to help me get my words in by sprinting with me. They're going to understand the trials and tribulations of writing, right? So and that's really important to me. So, and whether that's important to you or not, that's, I think, really good from a local level. From a more national level or even international, I would say, even if you hate Facebook, Facebook is where a lot of author groups are. So whether your readers are there or not, and my readers are there because I have older readers. But if you have younger readers, your readers may not be there. But I would say the authors probably are. And so what you would do is you look for groups, author groups. I belong to some urban fantasy author groups and some cozy mystery author groups, and be polite, participate, ask questions. It took me a long time to get invited to an anthology or, and really what cemented that for me, starting to be involved in things that helped my business, because I'm a very bad networker. It really was going to physical conferences and firming up the relationships I'd made online. So that's also a great thing to do. Writer conferences are really great. I hope that helps.
And then she also asked, how do you decide what the cover should look like? And I wonder if that is also tied into knowing your genre very well.
I did a presentation on this, and I did a whole hour and a half long presentation on it. So it's, and most of the presentation, I was saying exactly what Carly Rose just said. I was like, what's your genre again? Go back and tell me again, what's your genre? Go look at your genre, go look at the top sellers in your genre. So typically what you can do if you are in a well-defined, actively indie genre, is you can go and look at the top sellers and you can say, like the Amazon category top sellers. And you can say, well, you know what? Some of these just don't fit. They probably aren't really my genre. And then you can say, oh, wow, that cover looks like something that maybe could be on my book. And then once you find the ones that you can say, oh, those might be on my book, you could say, I notice, all of these have objects on the cover and all of these have people on the cover. And you can kind of start to segregate them out into groups. And you usually find 2 or 3 really strong trends in indie for any kind of major subgenre category. And then sometimes you just have some weird whatever something that's out there and is doing really well, and yay for them. But frequently you'll be able to lump them together.
And Fatos asks, how do you avoid writer's block?
I have a writing coach. It's funny. I actually, it's a Goodreads question, and I have an answer on Goodreads. I think under Cate Lawley, I answered that. And I basically said, I don't believe in writer's block because I don't. I think if you're not writing, it's because you don't feel good. It's because you're tired. It's because you got too much going on right now and your creativity is shriveled up and dried because, you got to like pay your bills. Or you've hit a point in the story where the story is just not working. I mean, technically, I think all of those things are what people consider writer's block. I think writer's block is just like as broad term for I don't wanna. And I've recognized at this point that I don't wanna usually has a very good solid reason. And it's not that I'm lazy. It's not that I literally don't want to. There is a solid underlying reason, and I need to figure out what that is and solve it.
Thank you. So Rachel asks, comment from Portia real quick. Do plumbers get plumber's block? I think plumbers have a different kind of block. Do soldiers get soldier's block? So Rachel asks, I'm publishing a nonfiction workbook for public health practitioners. I was told having a literary agent to give access to a publisher is the way to go. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. If you know of any agents I could follow up with, and if there are different ways to market for that niche.
That is so outside. I mean, I don't even want to try and answer that. I feel like that's so outside my experience that I might tell you something that's not right. Anytime someone says you absolutely have to have an agent or you absolutely have to be traditionally published, my question is always why, but you gave that answer. It's for access to certain things. Yeah, I honestly have nothing. I'm so sorry. I'm very nonfiction ignorant, and they're very separate in the land of indie publishing, that the 2 groups frequently don't collide.
Yes, and I promised Kate that these were fiction writers, and that's why she came and gave a presentation.
I did. I asked like 3 times, and then I put it in the
title. And from Hannah Lore, should we be afraid of Goodreads? I've heard it can be brutal.
I mean, like, I don't read my reviews over there. I mean, I'll go and read like when a book first drops, I'll go and read the first handful of reviews to make sure nothing terrible happened, which is good because I left a chapter out of a book once. And some lovely reviewer, and I mean that, I'm not being sarcastic, some lovely reviewer made a comment that made it clear that I had and saved my bacon. So other than that, I don't really do that. I would say there's a lady, her name is Alessandra Torres, and she does Inkers Con. It is a conference, and she is a huge advocate for Goodreads. I don't use it. I think it's a tool. There are ways to appropriately use it as a tool. There are ways to very inappropriately use it as a tool as an author. You don't want to invade a reader space when you're an author. So there are ways to do it appropriately, and she can tell you all about that. She talks about that stuff all the time, and it's Inkers with a K, Inkers Con.
Okay, so from Sandy, how would you find an illustrator? Is that the same or a different kind of skill than the cover? And I think Sandy was maybe writing a children's book, or
I have a friend, and I'm not a children's book author, so I'm going to give you my very, very not expert advice here. So it's not advice. So my anecdotal experience is I have a friend who used someone on Fiverr that did beautiful work for her. She owned the rights. It didn't cost her a fortune. It probably took 1.5 years to get all of the pictures because it was affordable. You're always going to pay for, what is it, quality, speed. What's the other one? Like you're going to get 2 of the 3, whatever. Anyways, there was no way. Sorry. Cheap. Oh, you're muted. Anyway.
You got it. It's cheap.
Yeah. So I would say that's a possibility. You really have to vet them. Deviant art is super cool. I have some people who've gotten good cover work done. So what you do is you go over there and you kind of stalk all those people. Stalk in the very positive, not illegal way of following someone actively on social media. I have to be careful. I'm like, I'm being recorded. So you go over to Deviant Art and you just like follow all of these people and kind of check out what they're doing. And if you find something that really jives, you can reach out to them and just say, hey, do you do this kind of work? I've had some friends of mine find really great cover artists that way. It's not cheap. Those people frequently are professionals. They're going to charge accordingly. So that's one way. And there is the SBC. There is actually an organization specifically for children book writers. And I should know the abbreviation because they are very active. They're even active in my little town and in Boise, they're active. So they are a great group. I don't hear anything but good about them. And they would probably be a really good resource for you if you're writing like board books that have illustrated, whatever, every page is illustrated.
Is it SCBWI?
Yeah, I think it is. What does that stand for?
That's from Hannah Laura. She put that in the chat.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's it. Yes. Go check them out.
Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators.
Yes. And most of these organizations will have some kind of a resources page on there. So look at that for sure.
And an illustrator gallery I see right away. Cool.
I just want to say something real quick. Lifelong writer, haven't published anything yet, but I've been working on several manuscripts. But something that I found personally helpful, maybe somebody else will. I found it very helpful to just look at what the debuting authors in your genre have published. Like who's being published for the first time right now in your genre, and just seeing, what's the benchmark. And I actually found that very inspiring because I found a couple authors where I was like, I know I could write something like this. I feel confident in that. And then there were some I read, oh, I can't do that. And then there was some I read, oh, I know I can do better than that. And sometimes that's what you need for that confidence. That's really all I want to say.
I mean, to that end, I have to say there is an audience for everyone's book. It's just a question of how large that audience is. And whether it's a profitable audience or not, because sometimes when the audience is super, super niche, you can make really good money with it because you can reach them easily, right? Or sometimes when it's that small, in order to find them, you're going to spend more than you're going to make or whatever. There is an audience. Every book has an audience. It's just a question of, is it your family? Is it your state, because it's a guidebook on national parks? Or is it, everyone who likes, vegan vampires, who like my silly mystery series, whatever. I mean, every book has an audience. It's just a question of how small or how large it is and how you find them. And that's the thing. Anytime you talk to any indie author who's trying to make a living, they will all talk about, I just want some eyeballs on my book. How do I get eyeballs on my book? And that is a constant struggle for us.
Sandy asked, have any of your books been made into a script or a video?
No, that's super cool. I have a friend going through the process right now. And there are just so many different ways that can happen now. It's a really exciting time for that. So I can't really say much about it because it's her personal stuff, but I can say it's been really fun to watch. She does have an agent who's handling it for her. And there are lots and lots and lots of venues, I mean, there's, all the little streaming channels are, a lot of original content is coming from each of those channels. Whereas before, it was more consolidated. So there are lots of options for that now. I do know, because I'm in Romancelandia, I do know that, Hallmark was doing some direct stuff, and that's changed. They're not really doing that anymore. They had their own like publishing arm that just kind of went defunct. And they were pulling in lots of those types of novels, which are the sweeter romance, women, some chick lit and some women's fiction with romantic elements. They were pulling some of those in and making Hallmark movies out of those. So that was exciting for some people, but yeah, not me personally. I don't think my stuff is appropriate. I mean, shouldn't say that out loud. Universe, do not listen. I don't think that my stuff is, for the most part, the type of thing that would happen with, right? Really quirky, paranormal, cozy mysteries. So those are a little less likely to end up in that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Video game script, yes. And that's apps and video and not video games, games like on your computer. Those are two big ones.
so Peter Lou asks, can I find a consultant or independent publishers for these services? You can help with editing, publishing, marketing.
Yes, you have to be really careful. You have to be really, there's a lot of vanity presses out there. A vanity press is someone who's going to take your money and make you pay for a whole bunch of stuff and then not give you a lot for it. It's hard. I would say whoever you're looking at, check out Writers Beware. It's a blog where they've vetted some and found them to be lacking. So you can check, if you have a specific company in mind, you can check and see if they're considered predatory through Writers Beware.
Yeah, okay, so they're asking, Kate, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. The question is, how did you connect with the Seasteaders? And I'll tell everyone, Kate and I are friends through means unrelated to seasteading, and she was a huge inspiration for the novelist program to begin with, because you know, as Kate, as you were starting getting published and starting writing as a career, I got to hear a lot of your learning curve. I think we got to talk a lot about that as you're learning. So I asked her to join because I wanted all of you to benefit from her hard-earned lessons in becoming a successful indie writer.
Yeah, I have at least one book that's got a dedication to, and I call her Carly Rose because I know her before she was Carly. Sorry, I didn't ask you earlier if that was the right way to address you. So we were actually roommates, and I can say that some of the content in my books was influenced by Carly Rose.
That was the fun part for me, because Kate would talk about certain plot points, or like how certain characters would end up in the story, or maybe they'd end up in the next book in the series. And I get to talk through all the fun parts of building a story, and she had to do the hard parts of actually writing it. So we have about 1 minute left of our scheduled time. Any last questions or comments?
Is there a way for them to get the resource page? It's just a few links, but I do think they're good links to have.
Yes, so I will send an email with the video of this event, and then yeah, I'll connect with you, Kate, make sure we get that included in the email. And everyone, if you're not subscribed to our email newsletter, please subscribe on seasteading.org, and that way you can learn about the next Seasteading Social in January. It has not been scheduled yet, so you'll have to keep an eye out for that. And then I'm going to put
what was that event, Carly, in January?
It hasn't been scheduled yet, so you'll have to.
Okay, and what's the topic going to be?
I don't know yet. I have to.
Okay, I've got a good, all right, I've got a good one. We've got a lot of information that we still need to process intellectually, emotionally, the whole thing. We might need to just let's recap everything we've heard, make sure we understood it. Even if that's only a half-hour call, I'd like to go through that, because there's a lot of information.
Sure. No, we can do that for the novelists. We can do that, and that can be separate from our Seasteading Social. And so thank you, Kirk. That's a great suggestion. So I'm going to put the link of our feedback form in the chat so you can suggest topics for future events. And thank you all for joining.